12 months ago, we bought a car. It's this car, the Land Rover Defender 110 Hardtop, also known as a van. Now, admittedly, when we bought this car 12 months ago, I promised all sorts of exciting things that we might be able to do with it, like changing its colour, putting new wheels on it, becoming a bit of a project car, essentially. And, well, I'm sorry to admit, we failed at that entirely. So I thought, rather than ignoring the fact that we've got this van entirely, I'd give a summary after a year of ownership and explain 10 things I hate about our Land Rover Defender. And the good news about this particular Land Rover Defender is, of course, the fact that we've bought it. It's not a car we've borrowed from a press office or pulled out of a car showroom for a few days. This is ours. And that means we can do really silly things with it, like, oh, I don't know, driving it through a river. Hello, and welcome to our latest video. I'm John Marcar, you're watching Driven, and this is 10 things I hate about our Land Rover Defender. Now, I like this Defender very much. That is ultimately why we bought it. But in the year of ownership that we've had and the 14,871 miles that we've driven, I've discovered there are a few things that I don't like, and that's what we'll be talking about in today's video. Now, before I start, I'm just going to remind you that we bought this car as an ex-demo from a Land Rover dealership, which means we had very little input into the specification, the design, the layout, anything like that. It was just very much what you see is what you get. So I say that to save you the finger fatigue of commenting something along the lines of, well, why did you buy one with a centre jump seat, you silly? Because we had no choice. In fact, no, say what you like, it feeds the algorithm. Call me a for all I care. Point number 1, interior storage. Yes, I appreciate that might sound ironic given that this is ultimately a van. However, what I'm talking about is what happens up front. Yeah, loads of places to store stuff in the back, but if you're a bit of a neat freak like me, what happens up here can be quite upsetting. Okay, now, there is a glove box. That is fair enough, although it is very small. And that means that anything else from a storage point of view that you want to keep up front with you here in your van means that it needs to kind of go on a shelf. And that looks a bit messy. Things like your 5 pork sausage rolls, your wallet, your sunglasses case, your spare GoPro, your keys. It all just looks a bit messy and cluttered. And I hear what you're saying. You can say, well, just throw it in the back. It's a van after all, which yes, I could do. But let's say, for example, I want to get my 5 a day from the back of my van. I'd have to stop the van, get out, get into the back, rifle through the stuff, and then carry it forward into the front, because there is no way of getting to the back of the van from the front of the van. Things would be different perhaps if I didn't have this, the centre jump seat, because then I may be able to have a storage box as an option in there, but I don't, and therefore it's a problem. And that leads me perfectly onto my second point. Point number 2, the centre jump seat. What's the point? In the year that I've had this car, I've used the centre jump seat a grand total of 2 times. Once was very uncomfortable, and the second time featured a 4-year-old child. Therefore, it wasn't so much of a problem. But beyond the constraints of using it as a child seat or the skinniest friend you may know, there's actually very little point in having this. And if anything, it's kind of just a bit weird. As an armrest, it's a thing, as it is a cup holder, but then it's a bit uncomfortable and weird. It's just not very normal. You end up having to drive along with a one arm back and some sort of Matthew McConaughey pose. So yeah. Point number 3, it's quite high. Now this one isn't too much of a problem for me because I'm blessed with length. However, as you will see, there is quite a large gap between the floor and the car, which means that my shorter friends find getting in and out can be a bit of a challenge. My lovely grandmother, for example, gave her a lift to my sister's not long ago, and we had to use a kitchen stepladder to get her in and out. But being even 6'1" doesn't come without its issues, because as I get in and out, as you can see, dangly feet, I'm making the outer sponge of my seat very soft already. Not great on a pretty much new car. Point number 4, these mirrors and blind spots. See, these mirrors, they just don't seem to go out far enough. And given that this is a van setup with a bulkhead, it also means that looking over my left shoulder for a blind spot check is absolutely impossible. And that can be a bit of a novelty, especially when changing lanes, overtaking, or if you come to a rather difficult country lane corner and you can't see what's coming from your left-hand side. And on the subject of mirrors, the rear view one is also worth talking about. Because of course we've got the jump seat, we've been blessed with a rear view camera instead of a mirror, which is fine for the most part. Really like it, except you'll notice there's something not quite visible on that rear view mirror, and if you jump out you'll see what it is. Yeah, can't see that when the car's too close, and that to me has been a bit of an issue, which brings us on to my next point: proximity sensors. Point number 5, proximity sensors. Very, very annoying. This, being a Land Rover Defender, is absolutely plastered with them. There are some on the front, there are some on the quarters, there are even some underneath the wing mirrors to help when wading through water to detect the depth of the water you're going through, which you might think is all very good, except when you do want to use them off-road, they won't shut up. They of course can't tell the difference between a car that you might be about to reverse into because you've not seen it in your rearview mirror, or a leaf. So if you're driving down a country lane like this one and you're driving very close to the bushes, it's just a constant beep fest. It's terrible. It's like having to edit a video where I swear a lot, but coming from the car. Point 6, speed limits. Now pay attention to this one because you might be about to learn something. There is a lot I like about this Defender, specifically the way that it drives. I'm a big fan of the big 3-litre straight 6 turbocharged diesel engine, and even for a big car, I like the way that this thing handles. But there is one very limiting factor to the overall enjoyment of this car, and that is solely down to the reason that this is the hardtop version, or commercial version, therefore a van. This, because it is a hardtop, is limited to van speed limits, which means that on a 50-mile-per-hour country lane, this thing's limit is 40. On a 60-mile-per-hour national speed limit lane, this thing's limit is 50. And on a dual carriageway, which for any other car would be 70 miles an hour, this thing is limited to 60. Now you might think, well, what's the issue with that? You just slow down a bit, except whilst you can, you always feel like you're a little bit in everybody's way. But there's another more serious, slightly more scary factor to it all, and that is speeding. Now let's say, for example, we're driving the car-derived version of this, the Land Rover, with seats in the back. If we're driving on the dual carriageway that we just mentioned at, say, I don't know, accidentally 84 miles an hour, then if we were to be stopped by the police or captured by a camera, then we would be subject to a bit of a talking to, a £65 fine, and an invitation to a speed awareness course. However, because this is not a car and does not have seats in the back, if I were to break that same speed limit in this car and the police officer were to stop me or the camera were to flash me, then the rules are changing. That fine could be as much as £800. And yeah, that's also 6 points on my licence, which would then of course affect my insurance premiums for about 5 years. And that court summons that could possibly also pop up could land me with jail time. All because this is a van rather than a car. And on that, that brings me on to my next point. Point number 7. It's actually not very good at being a van. Now, I fully appreciate that this next point is subjective because, of course, vans are available in all different shapes and sizes. But this being a Land Rover Defender 110 means that you are limited quite severely on the shape of this, meaning it's a bit useless at being anything other than an estate car. Now you can actually fit a pallet in the back of this, but only just, and if you were loading it with a forklift, then you're risking crashing into your own back door there. And then it can't be anything too high because of the way that the roof is sloped in. And this hasn't been too much of an issue for us because for what we're loading in the back, everything often fits no problem. But from a recreational point of view, I'm a very occasional, very avid cyclist, which means that when I put my bike into the back of this thing, I have to, annoyingly, remove the front wheel, the back wheel, and the seat to fit it in. And I feel like if I had a 5 Series or something with the seats folded down, I wouldn't have that same issue. Point number 8. Some things on this Defender 110 just haven't quite been thought through. For example, the hazard lights are on at the moment, and let's imagine that we've broken down on a dark country lane late at night. I need to get into the boot, which is what I'll do. So I'll open my back door, and that indicator has now almost completely disappeared. How has that happened? And it gets stranger. Keeping on the subject of lights, but for that we need to head up front. Now, the very observant Land Rover fanatics will have already noticed that this being a first edition 110, it has the non-self-leveling projector headlights. Instead, it's just the halogen LED poles. I don't know what they are, but you know, the ones that don't level themselves. And that can be good and bad for a number of reasons. The bad being that little old Doris that's often driving towards you on a dark country lane is convinced that you've got your main beam headlights on because the car is so high. You can alter it, you can alter it manually, but the location of where to alter it manually is the stupidest thing in the world. So picture the scene. We're driving along the country lane, and poor old Doris in her Honda Jazz is coming towards you, convinced that you've got your main beam headlights on. So you're a kind citizen, you want to lower the beam, and to do that, you just simply lower it. But in doing so, you've got to reach all the way down here. And that's fine, I guess, but why wouldn't you just put it there, or there, or there? Strange. Point number 9, fuel consumption. Now, I do love the way the Defender looks. I loved it from the day that it was launched. Again, partly the reason why we decided to buy one. But you don't have to be a excelling student of aerodynamic engineering to realise that this thing isn't blessed with the best drag coefficiency, and that does mean that there are 2 drawbacks. The first one is wind noise at high speed. That can be a little bit irritating. And the second one is, as I say, the fuel consumption. If this were any other 3-litre diesel car, you could be looking to average around 46 to maybe 50 mpg. But this Defender, which also has a 3-litre turbocharged engine, this is averaging 29. Ugh. And finally, point 10 of my 10 things I hate about the Land Rover Defender 110 hardtop. It is what I'm calling the sleepless nights. As the owner of a Defender 110, I'm sorry to say that sometimes it's a little bit difficult to sleep at night knowing that the car you've got parked outside in your driveway is quite hot property for baddies. Thieves love stealing parts off Defenders like spare wheels or snorkels or all sorts of accessories, and in the worst case scenario, they enjoy just taking the cars in general. And that concludes our video. That is 10 things I hate about the Land Rover Defender, a car which I should add I do actually like very much indeed. For now, I will say thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again in the next video. We'll be bringing you more content just like this, including more car reviews, more videos, podcasts. There'll be photo shoots.
John, the car's been stolen.
What?
The car's been stolen.
Oh, for God's sake!